go in with a joy and not being afraid to learn something new, not being afraid to admit when there's something you don't know. It's not a weakness to say, hey, you know what? I don't know the answer to that, but let me get back to you.
Hello, my feel-good friend, and welcome to a very special bonus episode 85 of the Feel Good Social podcast. Oh man, I am so excited to share today's guest with you. But before I do dive into explaining who this amazing woman is, I just want to say thank you so much for tuning into the show every dang week, my friend. I so appreciate having you on the other side of those earbuds. And I absolutely love the fact that I get to show up every week and have awesome conversations with you, share awesome conversations with you, and all the things. So I just wanted to tell you how much I totally appreciate you. And without further ado, I am super excited to introduce today's guest, my mom. My mom, Lisa, is joining us today on the Feel Good Social podcast. And I just have to tell you, I absolutely love this woman. I mean, she raised me. She turned me into the human I am today. She has done so much to influence me. And honestly, she has kept me sane in this entrepreneurship journey. I promise we are it's kind of codependency, let's be honest. I could call her my best friend, but I really do call her every day and just chat away in her ear, tell her what I'm excited about, complain about the things that I want to complain about. This woman is the person that I chat with every day, and she is seriously the sweetest soul in the world. Plus, she is a super amazing person in her own right. And especially when it comes to entrepreneurship, honestly, through this conversation, we chat about all of the different business ventures and jobs that she has had throughout her life and what it's taught her, and also how that has influenced me and what I've created with Feel Good Social and all of these things. She drops a lot of wonderful wisdom, if I'm honest, and I am probably being a little bit biased because it's my mom and I love her, but I swear I'm trying to look at her objectively, and I just gotta say, she's awesome, and I think you're gonna love her too and everything that she shares in this episode. All right, let's go ahead and dive into this bonus episode 85 conversation with my mom, Lisa. Hey, friend, and welcome to the Feel Good Social podcast. I'm your host, Kinsey, and I'm here to help you market your business in a genuine way that works without wasting your precious time. On this show, we chat about social media strategy and mindset tips with a focus on, you guessed it, feeling good. So sit back, relax, and enjoy some genuine conversation for the good of your biz. Hi, Mom.
Hi, Kinsey.
Thanks for joining us. I'm so excited to share you with the world.
Thank you very much for doing this and pushing me to do this.
Yeah, my friends. My mom is an amazing woman. I love her so much. She's just such a role model for me, but she is a little bit nervous.
And very shy. So this is way beyond my comfort zone.
But I totally get it because I would be nervous too. But it's going to be a wonderful conversation. I can feel it already. So, Mom, I guess I would just love to ask you about your journey becoming a chiropractor, which is your first kind of real world job that you had. What kind of drove you to decide to become a chiropractor?
That is actually an easy question to answer.
Nice.
So that helps. When I was growing up, I developed some type of illness that they weren't sure about. It ranged, diagnoses ranged everywhere from cat scratch fever to some type of pneumonia to something. And so I did spend a lot of time going to doctors, which I am so afraid. Even now, talking about medical doctors or any type of nurses, I get sick to my stomach, my hands sweat, I have the whole white coat fear. Mm-hmm. I did not get better until my folks started taking me to a chiropractor. And the nice thing with a chiropractor was it wasn't scary. I looked forward to going, and I started getting better.
Yeah.
And so as I grew up and I wanted to help people, And plus I have a fear of blood.
So not a regular doctor.
No,
that wasn't in the cards.
could not do that. And so a chiropractor was a very comfortable place for me to go. Plus I took care of grandma a lot, rubbing her back and that kind of thing. And I actually knew I had a talent that direction. And so becoming a chiropractor was not a hard decision.
Yeah. Yeah. Was it kind of weird? Because I know even when you like became a chiropractor and everything, like there was still kind of that weirdness about is what is it?
Chiropractic.
Is chiropractic like a real like medicine? Was it weird for grandma and grandpa to take you when you were younger even?
I don't think so. Okay. And the fact that I got better. I mean, until then, I literally was not getting better. And so for me, I knew what chiropractic could do. When I went to school, there were a couple different trains of thought. There were those people who felt chiropractic was the answer to everything. And that's not true. If it's a chiropractic issue, it will help. If there's other things going on that's not nerve related or muscle related or joint related, chiropractic's not going to fix that. It may help it get better sooner or make it be better, but it won't fix it. So like diabetes, for example, chiropractic is not going to fix diabetes. Will it help balance things maybe a little bit better? Yeah, it could do that. So one of the things that you run into as a chiropractor is trying to find your own answer. And so one of the things I always told people when they'd ask me about chiropractic is if one person doesn't help, go to someone else, but use your head. Ask over and over who seems to help, who's one of the comfort kind of people. And that's what I tried to be.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. I love this because like we've actually never really talked about that.
No, we have not.
I love it. Well, when you went through school and everything, and then you left school, you decided to start your own office. I sure did. And this is kind of funny. And this unfortunately tells you a little bit about my personality. So when I graduated from school, I actually was going to work for another doctor, but he did not contact me. And I guess I did not contact him. So after a couple months after I had opened my own place, he called and he's like, "Hey, are you ready to come down here?" And I'm like, "Sorry, I already started my own office." It was very, very hard for me to put myself out there. For those of you who do not know me, I am so extremely, extremely shy. So all of a sudden, opening up an office where I had to appeal to people I don't know and make sure that I could function and take care of them was absolutely down to the bone scary to me. And so for a few months, I kind of just put everything off and avoided doing it until my parents finally said, "You've got to do something." And so then I opened my own office and set up. I had everything under control pretty well. And what you do is you put an ad in the paper then and say, "Hey, I'm here," and people start coming in. What happened though was as I was getting ready, a couple days before my grand opening, air quotes, a friend of the family called and said they were in desperate shape. And my dad looked at me and he goes, "You literally just turned white as a sheet." And I said, "Because I'm not ready. I'm not ready to do this. No. I am so not ready to do this." And so in came this person into my office where I didn't have the paperwork ready and I didn't have this ready and everything wasn't ready. And I took care of her. And so she was my very first patient and things went well. And we went from there. And as a chiropractor, it took me a couple years till I got to the point where I felt comfortable more or less telling my story. And what I mean by that is to describe chiropractic to people who don't know, it's very confusing and very hard. And so finally, I had a way to show them what I'm talking about. So for those of you who don't know, if you would take your finger and just twist it slightly, but keep using it, the joint is going to become irritated and possibly swell, and your joints aren't going to move as well. And that's what happens with chiropractic.
throughout the course of whatever, whether it's stress and muscle tension that way, or you're raking leaves and you haven't done that and your body goes, oh my gosh, what are you doing to me? The muscle tightens up around the joint. And when that happens, it inflames the ligaments and the connective tissue that holds the joints together. When it swells, you get pressure on the nerve, and then all kinds of things can happen. So by just taking a patient and twisting their finger a little bit and saying, now, if I leave it like this for a little while, it's going to bother you. And so as a chiropractor, my point is to try and untwist and fix that area. And so for me, what I did as a chiropractor is I would relax them first. I would use a big vibrator thing and run it on their back and relax them as much as I could. And then I would, as gently as I could, move the joint back to where it should be. Sometimes you have to tell it a few times because it's stubborn and bullheaded and the muscles are still a little more tense. But for the most part, once you relieved that tension on the joint, it allowed the body to fix itself. And that's why stretching is so good. That's why yoga and massage are so good. If we would do that, you wouldn't need to go to a chiropractor because your body would have a chance to fix itself.
Yeah.
And that's the key. And so once I adjusted them, then I would use either cold to reduce inflammation, or I would use a hot pack to relax the muscles even further. And luckily people got better and I had a pretty good business and I loved it. And you're going, well, why didn't you keep doing that? Because of two reasons. One is I wanted everybody to feel better. And so I was putting in way too many hours, and Kinsey was just this little girl and I was missing out on way too much. The other issue I had, I absolutely loved taking care of people. And I would even do like kids for free because I wanted them to experience what I did as a kid. What I did not like was dealing with the insurance companies, dealing with lawyers when my patients were in a workman's comp case or a car accident or that kind of thing, because they were very vicious and it was not fun. And you had to fight constantly. And I am not a fighter. I am not a fighter.
Nope.
I could not do it. And so when we had the chance to move to Montana, I actually retired. And for me, that was a relief because I loved taking care of people. If I could have just done that, I would probably still be doing it. But the paperwork was killing me. And I knew that. So I stopped. I retired, I should say. I retired from being a chiropractor. So that was my first foray into owning my own business. I loved it. I loved it. I did not love the paperwork.
Okay. So that story that you kind of developed and you started telling your patients about the finger, they didn't teach you that in school.
No.
You kind of, was it you just trying again and again to figure out how to talk to people about it and then what they respond to?
Yes. It finally, because to explain chiropractor, if you say, oh, you run your fingers down the back and you look for something that's not doing what it should, that doesn't really compute to people. But if I can say, I run my fingers down your back and I'm looking for a spot that is much tighter than it should be and it's not functioning the way it was designed, that's what I fix. That made sense.
But even saying that, like you needed kind of that like story, that analogy to put it in like layman's terms almost to give people an example of what exactly you do.
Because over the years, chiropractic somewhat became kind of a voodoo-y kind of a thing. And part of that was because it wasn't explained well. And so for me, it was more of a teaching moment. I really like teaching people. And that's what I did. So I like it when people understood. I also, one of the hard parts though, too, was trying to be aware that what I did wasn't always what they needed. And so, because you want to fix everybody. But I also was very, very aware when what I was doing was not maybe what they needed. There were a few instances where I knew something wasn't right and chiropractic wasn't helping them. And it ended up, 3 of the people that I especially think of all the time, they actually had cancer. And so one lady went to her doctor after I said, you have something going on and it's not a chiropractic issue. She ended up having kidney cancer. And her doctor was like, how did you even think to come here? And she's like, oh, my chiropractor told me to come. And he's like, how did she even know?
Yeah.
And it was because her story to me did not make sense to fit into the chiropractic realm. So I knew there was an issue there that she needed to have checked further. And bless her heart, she went and checked. And so she lived a lot longer because she did listen to me.
Yeah. I love that. And I feel like that's kind of an issue with a lot of people. There's like this, whenever we start out, especially in business, we kind of want to be the jack of all trades. We want to do it all for everyone. And, there's different motivations for that. Like we have to make money. So we just want to give people what they want. But it's really, really scary for a lot of people to be like, like, I don't think we're a great fit, or like, I don't think I'm what you need.
Yes.
Were you ever afraid to do that? Or
oh my gosh,
like?
yes.
Yeah.
But the neat thing with that, and this is one of those historical kind of things. Okay. Back in the 80s, 70s and 80s, and probably before that, medical doctors were somewhat threatened by chiropractors. And some of it, the chiropractors brought on themselves. So I can't say anything about that because they did think they could fix everything. But the town I was in actually got to the point where the medical profession would send me patients because they knew I would tell the truth. And I would tell them if I didn't think it was a chiropractic problem. And now they would get in trouble by the AMA if they were found out that they were working with a chiropractor. So it really meant a lot to me to know that that was happening.
How did you kind of develop that reputation for truth telling?
I think because my patients weren't afraid to say, hey, my chiropractor sent me here. And especially those 3 particular cases that ended up being cancer. But because I would do that, or because I would say, now this is what I can do, I think you need to have this checked. But I hate to say this, there are chiropractors out there who wouldn't have done that.
But I love that example. It's like, it's kind of like that whole collaboration is way more beneficial long-term, relationship building, trust building.
Yes.
But it's so scary sometimes for us to like give up something that that we know we could possibly fix, or maybe we can't, but it's hard to let go of people sometimes.
I think for me, one of the things that I never ever wanted to take advantage of someone. That must be one of my core values. Yeah. It would be so painful to me to take advantage, which is why I didn't charge for kids. I really should have, and it would have helped me. But my mind said, if I can help those kids and make them as healthy as possible, and parents a lot of times couldn't afford to bring all their kids in. So if I made it free, I would do any kid up to age 18 free. They brought them in when they needed to come in. And I think because I was a kid and enjoyed going to the chiropractor when I was a kid, I also wanted them to feel that way. Matter of fact, I didn't even think about this, but I've had, as far as patient-wise and children, I've probably had at least 5 of my children patients who ended up becoming chiropractors. And I hope I had something to do with that.
Well, I think you probably did. Let's be honest. But I think that's really, really cool. And if you were still doing chiropractic and you were coming to me for social media advice, I'd be like, tell that story on social media, because it's so cool. And I love the background of that. On the opposite side of that, though, I think a lot of us are afraid, because I know that I'm that way, where I was raised by this amazing woman who gives, but I also struggle sometimes with like a fear of being taken advantage of. Do you feel like you were ever taken advantage of?
Yes, that did happen. And sometimes that was a really tough one for me, because I would do anything for anybody. And that took a lot out of me. And I think that's why when we did move to Montana, it was a bit of a relief, because it was like, okay, I can step back and I can relax. So for example, on that, we lived about 20 minutes from the office. And one 4th of July, I literally had 3 people who called with an emergency. And so that meant stopping what we were doing 4th of July, driving the 20 minutes in, fixing them, taking care of them, driving the 20 minutes home. And it happened 3 times in one day. And that was probably the eye-opening thing, because it was like there was no 4th of July. And some of them would say, yeah, this happened last week.
And you're like, you waited till the 4th of July?
And you waited till the 4th.
What the heck?
Yes. And that happens a lot.
Boris? His
Yeah.
name is probably Boris.
Yeah. So that did happen a lot, where people would just say, oh my gosh, I did this last week, but now I can't stand it. And please take care of me.
Yeah.
And you're just kind of like,
yeah. And it's hard. Did you ever like try to set any boundaries with people, or was it kind of like oh, okay, we're moving. See ya.
I'm not very good at boundaries.
I know. I mean, neither. I think a lot of people struggle with boundaries in general, but like that is why they're so important. And, it's also like, not to say that is really a bad thing. Like I try to say that a lot of times, or whenever I'm feeling like a little taken advantage of, or like worried about, like, did I just like overstep a boundary there or something like that? It's like doing kids for free and like going the extra mile for people really makes a difference in people's like opinions of you. And it really helps to develop that trust. And like ultimately, in a way that you can't measure, it probably came back to you in like a great way.
I don't mind, other than the fact that it got to the point where I was exhausted.
Yeah. Self-care.
Yeah. And I wasn't very good at that. And so I tend to avoid things. So it's almost easier to like to run away and say, oh, sorry, we're moving to Montana
later
than it was to fix that.
Yeah. Yeah. So we moved to Montana.
Yes,
Dad got a job out there, and it had always been a dream of yours, right?
Yes.
Why had it always been a dream?
I don't know why.
Okay.
From the time I can even think, I always wanted to go to Montana. I've always liked the whole idea of being out west. And even in 5th grade, I can remember we had to write somewhere to a newspaper and have them send it and compare events from there with our events. It was a 5th grade project. And I wrote to Great Falls, Montana.
Oh, cool.
And so there was just something there. And I know as a kid, mountains always was my thing. Like you talk to people and they're like, oh, my happy place is the beach, blah, blah, blah. I always felt that pull in the mountains. Mm-hmm. So there was always something about mountains that was my soul place. Mm-hmm. And so when your dad had a chance to move to Montana, he's like, what do you think? And I'm like, oh, I'm ready. Let's go.
This happened for a reason.
Yes.
When was the first time you like visited mountains and everything?
I can't remember not, because I was luckily born into a family who did enjoy traveling. Mm-hmm. And so the chance to travel was always met with excitement and looking forward to it, and the adventure. And even I laugh about this, but I think I like early mornings, because as a kid, when we would travel, we'd get up very early in the morning, mm-hmm. and there was that sense of anticipation of what the day was going to bring. Yeah. So it's all kind of wrapped into one, but there was always something about the mountains, always, more than the beach.
Yeah. Yeah. And I kind of feel the same way. And I don't know if like you passed that on,
Probably.
like your excitement for the mountains, but it just always felt like special. I think it does have a lot to do with you, and just like living in Montana. You always like just were excited to be there.
Every single second, there was something that I was very grateful for. Mm-hmm. And that's what I tried to also maybe pass on is, people talk about going to the beach and it's their happy place and they're very relaxed and they're very comfortable. And for me, the mountains fed something inside me. Mm-hmm. And it was a very peaceful, calm place for me.
Yeah. So if you don't mind, I'd love to ask you just a little bit, because we talked a little bit about how like liberating it was to move to Montana, but also like scary.
Yes.
Like, how was it, I guess, like leaving your entire family, which is very close?
There's part of me that always has liked adventure. And I used to joke about if I was born in the 1850s, 60s, 70s, I would have been on a wagon train headed west, mm-hmm. because there's that draw for that. And so I had the chance, And here we are, and we went. And then I spent about a year being horribly depressed. And I have no idea why, because I finally got one of the things I wanted, but it was very hard to put myself out there.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was kind of funny because it was like, here I was handed what I wanted,
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't know what to do with myself.
Do you think like the shyness was a big part of
Oh,
that?
I think the shyness was a huge part, because that's a very tough thing to overcome.
Mm-hmm.
So here I am in a place where it was just your dad and you, and I didn't know many other people, and it's just awkward. It was an awkward thing.
What do you think kind of helped to
break that?
Yeah, break through.
Well, luckily, early on, I took you to the library because books are important to me too.
Mm-hmm.
And I ran into a lady who had a girl who looked exactly like you and her little sister. And you two hit it off, and you started talking, and then
I started talking to her. It's so funny because sometimes I feel pretty shy too.
Not this time. And it was almost like meant to be, and they became our family.
Mm-hmm.
And so for the next 10 years that we lived out there, we spent holidays together, and I took care of her kids, and it was very much a unit, a family unit.
Mm-hmm.
And I was very grateful for that also.
Yeah. Oh, yay. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about the canoe rack.
Okay.
Because that's kind of your
Yes.
next business endeavor.
Yes.
Well, you did like take care of Claire and me and Jenna.
Yes. Your dad, at that point, we went out. When we moved to Montana, he was working for an RV company and did very well. But he had a tendency about every 3 years to kind of derail a little bit and would try something different.
Mm-hmm.
And that was fine, but he kept looking for something. He grew up in a canoe and kayak shop in
Mm-hmm.
Indiana. And so that was a very comfortable thing for him. And there was an older man in town who had a business called the Canoe Rack, and he was looking to sell. So your dad came and said, hey, let's buy this, and we will start a canoe and kayak shop. And at that point, I was around your dad when he was kayaking. I had done it maybe 3 times in my whole life.
Mm-hmm.
I loved it.
That's how you guys met, right?
Yes, that's how your dad
you
and I met.
decided to go on a canoe trip with church or something.
Yes, that's it exactly. And I loved it.
Yeah.
But I wasn't very good at it. And so I was kind of like, well, yeah, okay, we'll try this. And so we bought this business, and we expanded it, and we did very, very well. And the thing I found out about this, so this was probably one of my more favorite jobs in my whole life, was selling canoes and kayaks. To this day, I've probably been in a canoe and kayak 20 times or less, which you're kind of going, really? And you were selling them? And it's like, yes, it was so much fun. And the difference between chiropractic and selling yourself with a service business and selling something that people can put their hands on, it was pretty dramatic. Like for chiropractic, I was always a little afraid to say, hey, I really need x-rays to treat you the best I can, because it was an expense that a lot of people couldn't afford, or they hadn't met their deductible. And so it's really hard to overcome the I really need to see the x-rays versus I want you to feel better and I want to take care of you.
Mm-hmm.
So balancing that was always hard for me. It was always kind of hard to sell what I could do for them without them feeling like I was taking advantage price-wise.
Mm-hmm.
With the canoe and kayak shop, and this was just absolutely wonderful. I still love selling because of that. People came to us because they wanted to be there and they wanted to buy something,
Mm-hmm.
which is a whole different way of thinking. People literally came in and they had $500 or $1,000 or $3,000 because they wanted to buy a boat. And so the cool part is you had to get to know them a little bit to find out what kind of paddling, what their dream, what was in their head that they saw themselves doing. And so then you would make recommendations and you would get them excited about what that was, because I could sell a boat very easily. I wasn't very good at paddling. I was kind of the lollygagger, sit back and look at the scenery go by as I paddled, where your dad was the diehard racer, push, 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 push. So we balanced each other pretty well.
Yeah.
So when you'd sell a boat, you would say, oh, what are you thinking? What do you want to do?
And if they're like,
boat?
I want to race, you're like, okay, Matt.
Exactly. Because he had that down pat.
Yeah.
And most racers were very intense, which is not me. If somebody came in and they're like, well, I think I want to paddle a kayak, you would say, are you looking to go like out on a lake? Or are you looking to go down a river? Are you looking to go back up that river? Because that would depend on what kind of boat they had then. And so you would show them their choices. You would explain what it did. You would show them the paddles and the gear and the fun stuff. And they would go home happy.
And like whenever you were kind of like upselling, like paddle, for example, like there's a really solid reason that people would understand.
Yes.
Like this one's more lightweight, more sturdy, something like that.
And sometimes, so if any of you are now excited to go out, try Canadian
Call
kayaking.
my mom.
Because I can tell you, sometimes the other stuff actually was more important than the boat itself. Because a paddle, if it's too heavy, you're going to work really hard, and that's not going to be fun. If your boat is not streamlined to fit what you want it to do, you're not going to have fun. That boat is going to sit in your garage, and you're going to go, I really should take that out. Why did I buy that? We want you to have fun. And it is a blast. It is.
You're pitching for the canoe.
I am.
Okay, wait. I'm really interested. Who taught you about boats? How did you learn about boats?
Well, that would have to be your dad and your grandpa because he owned Fluid Fun. So once you learn like what a boat can do and the specs of it more or less, because I can tell you right now, a Spirit 2 weighs 76 pounds and is 17 feet long.
Oh my goodness.
So once you know what the design of the boat does and what each thing happens, it's very easy to explain to a person what they need or what they should look at. So, for example, the longer the boat, the faster you go in a straight line. So if somebody is looking to go up and down a river, they want a longer boat that they can paddle faster. If they're looking to go just play in the waves along the beach, they might want a shorter boat because most shorter boats were wider and more stable. So if they're a little bit cautious and afraid, they're going to want a shorter boat because they'll turn quicker. The other thing, this is kind of horrible, but we had a certain type of boat that we kept on hand. We didn't sell many of them because they weighed a ton. They were absolutely bulky and uncomfortable, and they're sold a lot in sporting goods stores.
Well, you have to like show people what they don't want.
Exactly. Because if you lifted up one of those boats and then you lifted up one of our better boats, they're like, do you want to put that boat on top of your car every single time you want to go out? And most of the time the answer was no.
I love how like example oriented your like selling is as well.
I think I had to be because my skill level was not great. Now, what also allowed me to sell boats though was because most people who came in, their skill level was not that great. And so they could look at me and understand that this was something I didn't grow up doing versus your dad. And look at her, she can carry that boat down the hill, or she can do this, or I would paddle them upstream, or I would make a suggestion. Now your dad was like, well, you need to use the J stroke to do this or that, and blah, blah, blah.
You made it really accessible and relatable.
Yes, but he knew way more than I did, and I learned a lot from them.
But at the same time, do you think like the student oriented, like analytical part of you was able to make connections really easily? Yes,
I do. I do.
And I love that you like can pull out those facts still. Have you always been able to like remember facts really easily?
Some things like that. Now, some things like, for example, we'll go back to the chiropractic end of it. I can tell you the 4 parts of tetralogy of flow. Because that was something that you would see on x-ray, but it's been so long since I've done that. I wouldn't trust me doing that. I would say, oh, look, there's something here on your x-ray. You need to go talk to your doctor about that.
Right.
So, but that was one of the things that helped me. I'm always Like I'm always Googling things and learning new things. And so knowing the boats helped me a lot because I knew the physics. I'm also science oriented, in case you didn't figure that out. So the physics of the boats was helpful, and the physics of the paddle, and the physics of the life jacket. And so because I knew the science behind it, that also helped me sell. So one of the things I guess I'm saying to anybody out there listening is know your product. And if that's a service, know your service. Know why the person should come to you. It's because you know what you're doing and you know you have a passion for that. So you can even tell in my voice, after all these years, I still have a passion for chiropractic. I still have a passion for selling canoes and kayaks. That hasn't changed. And almost every job I've ever had, I develop a passion for doing it because I love it.
And that's like very, very helpful in keeping you going as a person, but also I think in selling, like there's this energy that we give off when you're doing something that you don't want to be doing.
Yes.
And there's also an energy you give off when there's an excitement, you know?
Yes. And it's not afraid. Kinsey and I talked about this earlier. Don't be afraid to ask for help if it's an area that you just can't do. Boat-wise, especially in Montana, we dealt with whitewater on occasion. We had a few whitewater boats for the people who would come to us, but we weren't whitewater paddlers. We were flat water paddlers. Indiana doesn't have hardly any whitewater. So that was a background that your dad and I, neither one knew anything about. So we actually hired someone to help us out with that area because it was kind of beyond our comprehension. We didn't have a story to relate to people about whitewater. And so don't ever be afraid to say, I have no idea. Yeah.
I love that you brought it there. And I love that you said we didn't have a story to tell about whitewater. Like, I feel like giving examples, analogies, telling stories about your own experience was like a big part of selling for you as well.
Yes.
For both you and Dad. And also I wanted to bring up the fact that you knowing your boats is a big deal because you and Dad had like 400 boats in stock. It wasn't just like 10 boats that you had to learn. It was like 400.
It was. And that was one of our selling points too, is that you could actually try the boat out. I mean, you can tell somebody all the time, oh, this is the best boat for you. And they're like, how do you know that? Well, come down here to the river. We'll put you in and you can try it for yourself. Now, occasionally, because people had to watch their pennies, they would go and buy a boat from someone else. And so again, if we didn't make a connection with people, that would be an issue. But for a lot of times, people actually would become friends and they would call us up and, hey, where are you guys paddling Sunday? We want to come. And that was pretty cool.
Yeah, you developed this like community around boating.
Yes.
And I do think the fact that you and Dad were so different.
Yes.
It was probably a good thing. But did you guys like ever butt heads when it came to selling, or were you pretty good at like sending him the racers and you sticking with the lollygaggers, as you said?
He was pretty good about selling the boats, but I could tell occasionally like he would talk over their heads because he knew boats so well. And so he would talk about the paddle ratio to the water, blah, blah, blah. And they're like, I have no clue what you're saying to me. Where, because I didn't know those kind of things, I didn't have that problem. But if a racer would have come to me, I would have had the same issue. So the good part, for the most part, we were able to just help people.
Yeah.
And so that's what we did. And that worked out pretty well. And this is a funny story, and I hope Kinsey takes this as a funny story.
Oh, goodness.
Her dad was very, very competitive because he was a racer and he had made the Olympic team. So that shows you his sense of competition. There was one day we were selling boats and we were really good, and he had kind of a harder customer than I did. I sold 6 boats that day. He sold 1. And that really bothered him that I actually beat him that day selling boats. But it was just one of those things. He had a tough customer.
Yeah.
And I had easy ones, the ones who came in with the cash and were like, yeah, we're ready to buy. Okay, here. Oh, here. It was awesome. It was so much fun. And again, the energy of selling like that is just unbelievable.
And like celebrating. And
Yes.
and also selling with an ease of like not trying to manipulate people.
No.
I love the fact that like you're just like, people come to you and they want to be there. It's not like trying to.
Right. They come to us with a wish and a dream. They have this vision of what they wanted to do on the water. And sometimes it was relaxing. They wanted to just be out and commune with nature or take pictures or that. Or sometimes they had this vision of paddling down a river and just being there. And sometimes they were racers and they wanted to go and beat the next guy in the boat. So it was pretty cool.
Yeah, I love that. Then we moved back to Indiana.
Yes.
Which was difficult.
And
you and Dad, got divorced and all this stuff, and you had to like change careers again kind of thing. Was that really difficult? And like, how did you kind of adjust your mindset? I mean, I know it was a difficult time in general.
Right. The thing with the boats, because I did love selling them, it came down, it was your dad's family's business. So for the most part, he deserved it. And so that was a little bit hard to give up something I really enjoyed doing. And then I had to find another job. And so you kind of panic in those situations. And I kind of took what was offered to me, and that was being a paraprofessional at a school. And so I did that, but I got lucky and I got wonderful kids, and partly because I enjoy kids. So it also was a fun job. And I worked really hard at developing a really close relationship with those kids. Matter of fact, if they'd see me now, they would like hug me and,
Yeah.
So that was awesome. But that led into my next job, which was teaching computer. And that was funny and tough because the only thing I knew at that point was I knew how to email and eBay. That was all I knew about computers. And you're going, well, how did you get a computer job? Well, I was taking care of these kids and helping out, sometimes substitute teaching. And my boss, the principal, he's like, there's a job opening for the computer teacher. I'm like, I know, but I'm not going to apply for it because I don't know computers. And he goes, doesn't matter. You're good in the classroom. He says, I've made an appointment for you to interview tomorrow. And so I went to the interview and I told that principal, I don't know how to do computers. I really don't. And he goes, you can be taught. And so all of a sudden, here I am trying to teach computer to elementary kids. And honestly, the first week in school, I would go up to a kid and say, so what are you doing there? Tell me what you're doing. And I had to learn really quick.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of fun and funny. And I loved it. I loved working with the kids. I taught keyboarding and I taught a children's version of Word and Excel and all these things. And I took care of our school's bulletin board, and it was fun, but it was awfully scary. So I kind of kept getting tossed into these jobs where I really didn't know a whole lot.
Yeah.
But I loved it.
Well, there's like two things there, definitely. Like, firstly, there's something about you that it must be just like about your personality and your values that like people see in you that they're like, I need this woman to do this job. Like the logistics of the job can be taught.
Yes.
But there's something about your personality that they know you can take on new things and that you're good at dealing with people.
I hope so, because that's how I kind of see myself.
Yeah.
I like to teach people. And canoeing and kayaking was a lot of that. Chiropractic was a lot of that. The elementary computer job was a lot of that.
You have like that, maybe that's your secret sauce, Mom. You have this way of like taking things, learning them for yourself, and then also relaying them to other people in a way that's manageable. And I also think that there's something in your personality that's like that caretaker, that person who sees other people and who just makes people feel at ease as possible, I think,
I try to do that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it says a lot like that your boss at your school was like, I know that you don't know anything about computers, but you're still interviewing.
Yeah.
And then the boss at the other school, I know that you don't know anything about computers, but I'm still hiring you.
Yes, I know. And when you say it, it sounds like, oh, really? Oh my gosh.
No, it sounds amazing.
It was.
Yeah, no, I think that that's something that you can take pride in. A lot of people like nowadays when they talk about hiring, they talk about hiring for personality because it's much, much harder to teach someone to be kind, to teach someone to be a team player, to teach someone to think creatively.
Right.
All of the skills that a lot of people put on resumes aren't really that important. They can all be taught.
Right.
And honestly, too, a lot of times, like it's almost better in a way, depending on what type of boss you are, to get someone where you need to teach them the skills anyway, because people will develop habits that aren't necessarily or how you do work, you know. But I also love that you just constantly throughout your life keep taking on these things that you really don't know much about, like, and the fact that you kind of started as a shy person, still sometimes are shy, I know, but I don't think of you that way anymore, really, you know.
See, and I still hide behind a lot of stuff.
But I don't know, do you feel like throughout your life of like taking on new things, that's given you confidence in a way, or helped you deal with fear?
It has. Like, I always fear that I'm going to have to start a new job and start out over again, even though I've done it hundreds of times so far. Because after the computer job, I also added to the computer and I was the energy person at our school. Do I know how an HVAC system works? No, I don't. But I started the program for our school system. And so I was in charge of making sure people saved energy as much as possible and tried to make it as fun as much as possible. Mm-hmm. And so we did funny things. They called me the kilowatt queen because I sent them out, and I did write people up on occasion, but I tried to make it funny so that I wasn't offending people. And I had a lot of fun doing that.
Yeah.
Then I got married again and moved, and I had to take a job with a big eye doctor clinic conglomerate. And I was put in the one job that I have to say I didn't like. And that was entering data on a computer. And so for 8 hours a day, I entered data on a computer, and I hated it. Mm-hmm. It was one of the few jobs I hated. But then I had an opportunity to work with one of the doctors. We went to nursing homes and took care of people in nursing homes and did classes. And I loved that, which led to my next job and the job I'm doing now. One of the nursing homes had a ceramics program, and I was given the job to head up their ceramics program. And so did I ever do ceramics before? No, I didn't. But I learned again, and I absolutely love it. Absolutely love my job. So anyway, I get to make the pieces. So I pour clay into molds, and I open them and I put them in the kiln. I have classes, and the residents come in and they paint the pieces and we fire them. And it's an absolute ball. Who knew that I would enjoy ceramics so much?
I mean, I could have known that because you've always been creatively inclined as well. Like, even though all of your jobs kind of up until the ceramics job have not been super just like, I guess, artistic, but like you've always been a craft person.
Yes. And I have to say, other than the one data entry job, there's always been something about the job I've enjoyed. Another one that tucked in there somewhere and it was a second job. I worked at a hotel as the 11 to 7 clerk, the front desk clerk. And you're like, that doesn't sound fun. But it actually was. I got to meet people, sometimes not in great shape. There were a few drunken wedding party groups that came through. But I also got to know these really cool people from all across the country. One man in particular would come to town for Notre Dame football games, and he would always talk. He'd always come up to the desk and talk at night. And he ended up, like, we formed a really good friendship. And he would, whenever he couldn't use his Notre Dame tickets, he'd call me and say, "Hey, Lisa, do you want to take Kinsey and go to the game?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure. Thank you." But it was another one of those where I enjoyed getting to know other people and their stories.
Yeah.
So
I know. Do you think that, I think you've told me that you're an introvert before.
Oh yeah.
But you tend to like really, really enjoy being around people and helping people and developing relationships.
I have discovered about myself what I really enjoy is getting to know somebody one-on-one kind of thing. So I'm pretty good in small groups. My area that I'm not good at all is larger groups.
Yeah.
So for example, as a pastor's wife, which is also kind of a job, my second husband is a minister. And as a pastor's wife, sometimes they expect you to be able to do things that like it's just way beyond my capability. One is like to stand up in front of the congregation and do a prayer or lead the liturgy or even light candles. I can't even light candles.
Is it that spotlight thing?
It is. Yeah. It is. And even now too, with the COVID thing, the ceramics program, we've had to close that down, but I've been helping out with the activities, which is wonderful. But I've discovered that I have to hide behind something in order to do something that puts me in the spotlight. So, for example, if I had to do trivia over a closed circuit TV, so there's like 500 people looking at me over TV trying to do something, and I knew I forget my name. I can't, I just can't function.
Oh, yeah.
And so this is something I learned in high school in speech class even, that if you have a prop of some kind, they don't look at you. And so in speech in high school, I would always have a prop when I had to do a speech, always. At the residence home, I have some type of prop that I'm usually hiding behind. I did a Father's Day thing, a trivia quiz. So I took all these fathers' heads and put them on a stick. And then I gave trivia and they had to guess who this father was. So I had like Henry Fonda up in front of my face or John Wayne in front of my face, and I'm giving trivia. And then they had to choose, but they weren't looking at me.
And so you felt more comfortable.
I felt so much more comfortable.
Did your speech teacher give you that trick, or did you kind of figure it out for yourself?
Because of the types of speeches we had to do, I learned real quick that was where my out was. I'm going to swing back to chiropractic a little bit. And this is one of the reasons I retired also. One of the things as a chiropractor, you do have to deal with people who have been in car accidents or workman's comp or that kind of thing. And that usually involved lawyers. And I discovered that was not something I did well at. I know some people thrive on that. They couldn't wait to go to court and say, this is what we did and this is why we did it and blah, blah, blah. That was not me.
Yeah.
And so anytime that happened, I literally would sweat and freeze because I knew if I got put on the stand, they would say, Dr. So-and-so, blah, blah, blah. And I would go, I don't even know my name. How can I explain what I did to this person? And it's that much of a fear for me. Back to lighting candles at church. As a kid, one of the times I did that, I literally fell down the stairs.
Yeah.
So the fear was so great always of just not functioning.
Yeah.
And so that's probably one of my bigger weaknesses. I've gotten better at it. But even doing this podcast is a stretch for me.
Yeah.
Because the fear.
Yeah.
And so my voice is really tight and I'm not real relaxed sitting here, but I'm also hiding because it's not videotaped. So I'm allowing myself to function.
Oh, Mom, I think you're doing an awesome job. I was just thinking that. I'm just like, I knew you're nervous, but you're doing an awesome job and giving awesome answers. And
well,
I love it.
I like telling stories. And I think that's back to that learning and teaching thing. Because if people can relate to a story, they're like, oh, I never thought of it that way. Or, look at that. I could do that. Because I think that's the thing. There's a lot of things that we're afraid to do. I mean, if I would have made excuses every time, I would have never sold boats. I would have never taught kids computer. I would have never done ceramics in this residence thing. So there's a lot of things that has pushed me way beyond. If Grandma and Grandpa wouldn't have kicked me out of the house to go and
to
start my office, so there's a lot of things where I've had to overcome that fear.
Mm-hmm.
But the one fear that still I fight is people looking at me.
Yeah. Well, do you feel like, I think it seems like a big part of you facing your fears has been slightly people pushing you to do that.
Yeah.
But also kind of like later in life, like you saw that ceramics job and you wanted to go for it. And then also I was really proud of you because a nursing home ceramics job doesn't pay very well,
No.
But you wanted it, but you also, you knew that like you weren't able to switch jobs unless they were paying you more. And so instead of just saying, like, I guess it's not meant to be, or being like, okay, I'll take the job, even though I'm going to have to make a lot of personal sacrifices, like money wise, you had the courage to ask for more money and they gave it to you.
In some ways, that one was, I couldn't. I was working for the eye doctors and I was working horrendous hours because they had switched over to a computer system. So I was salary, but I was doing way more than my 40 hours a week, way more. And it literally was physically killing me. So taking the ceramics job, it was such a low pay. And I literally could not take it at that. And so it became a thing. There was not a choice.
Yeah.
Either they were going to have to increase the pay a little bit, or I was going to have to say no and stay in that job that I knew was killing me. And so it wasn't really being brave or any of those things. Sorry.
It still took bravery. It took bravery to do that.
I just had to go and say, this is what I would need. And luckily they came back after a week and said, okay.
Okay, we love you. Even though there were other, like I see so much, Mom, you actually beating out other applicants and other people because of who you are, because people like you and they want you in those positions. There were other applicants for the computer job, for this ceramics job,
for the energy job,
and all of them. And you showed up and you were yourself and
I also, to add to that, not only because I tend to be a very enthusiastic person, just because I find joy in doing an awful lot. So I was very enthusiastic that way, but I also did my homework on almost all those jobs. I knew what was going in, and so that's something that's important also.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, not just personality, but you did your research. You showed up, and they could tell you care about a lot of things, especially like a lot of things that you find important, like these jobs and stuff. And so people can tell that too when you show up and you're knowledgeable, and they can tell that you care about it. That makes a huge difference.
Right.
Okay, I know that we're running out of time, but I wanted to ask you, what do you think, like one piece of advice for kind of like entrepreneurs, people going for it, would be?
I think what I would say is go in with a joy and not being afraid to learn something new, not being afraid to admit when there's something you don't know. It's not a weakness to say, hey, you know what? I don't know the answer to that, but let me get back to you. That's okay too. And this is bad because I wasn't very good at it, but don't be afraid to take care of yourself, because that's important too. So have fun. Don't be afraid. Try new things, because there's lots I would have missed out on if I would have given in to my fears. And what's the worst that will happen? You have to try again, or you have to start somewhere new. Is that a big deal? No, you can do that.
No,
it's okay. And so that would be my advice.
Yeah. And I love that. And I think that that's something that you have like exemplified a lot. And like the whole self-care thing too. It's amazing for you to share that, even though you didn't feel like you did a great job of it necessarily, like you're still learning about it and all that stuff. But like the fact that you could say, like it would have been better to take care of myself. Like that's something that we can learn from as well.
Right. The other thing too, that I kind of want to add is I constantly have other ideas of other things that I want to be an entrepreneur for. So it's like my brain keeps working. What if I would start this? Or I have a passion for that. Maybe I should do that. And so my brain's constantly saying, hey, that's an idea. Now, I might not ever do anything about it, but I always have like another 10 ideas coming.
So. And you're excited about it, and you don't make it mean anything about you that it might not happen.
It might not
It's
happen.
just kind of fun and enjoying the process of creativity and imagination.
Yes.
I love that. Okay, Mom. Well, usually at the end of the show, we have people plug their businesses, but I know that you don't need to plug the nursing home. So I'd love for you to tell everyone a little bit about the Native Americans that you would like to sponsor in the future.
Oh my goodness, that's cool. Because that's something else I think. Maybe when I retire, one of my passions is for especially the South Dakota Native American Sioux. They're living on land that we as Americans have put them on. And it's a sad thing in the United States that people still live where they have dirt floors and they use outhouses and they sleep on the floor because they don't have beds. And there's a big alcohol problem on the reservations, and there's not a lot for the kids to look forward to because it's very hard to break out of that circle of poverty. And so one of the things that I keep telling myself I want to do is to sponsor some of the children on the Sioux reservation. So that's something that I'm looking into. And so that is another passion.
Yeah. And there's a website that I'll link in the show notes if anyone's interested in learning more about that stuff. That kind of lists a bunch of different children that you could sponsor. And that means
adults.
And so it's monetarily, but also just like connection and like forming a relationship with these people to just kind of be that friend and that constant in their life that they don't necessarily have right now. So I'll definitely link that in the show notes.
Thank you for doing
that.
I
love you so much. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you, Kinsey. Thank you very much.
And maybe we'll have to bring you back and have you talk. I feel like there's so many more things. We can talk forever.
Right.
But
Thank you.
Love you.
I love you.
All right, my friend. I hope that you love my mom as much as I love my mom. I mean, it's not just me, right? And I really hope that this conversation not only just, I don't know, was enjoyable in a way. I feel like, it's kind of fun just to tune into people having easygoing conversations and sharing their story, right? That's part of the reason you show up, right? But also, I hope that my mom, what she shared is really, as inspiring to you as it is to me. And I hope you gleaned some knowledge nuggets from this woman who has been in the entrepreneurship world for years, right? Anyway, thank you so much for tuning into episode 85, this bonus episode with my mama. I hope you loved her, and I do hope that you check out the link that she wanted to share and the charity that she would love to bring light to. All right, my friend, I hope you have a wonderful week, and I will catch you next time I catch you. Thanks so much for listening, my friend. For show notes and a whole lot of other awesome freebies, visit feelgoodsocial.com. Simply go to feelgoodsocial.com for all the goods.